Good day. My name is John Adams, and I am here to share
10 fascinating facts about John Adams.
Oh, fascinating. I do not consider myself a fascination, but certainly not everyone knows a great deal about me. So then, in that spirit of enlightenment, we shall begin.
Number 1.
John Adams wanted to be a farmer. Yes, that is true, actually. From my younger days, I longed to follow my father into farming, and though he wanted me to enter into the ministry. So instead, I became a lawyer, so neither of us got what we wanted. Although I did keep a farm on my property, and farming brought me great satisfaction. I was even president of the Massachusetts Society for Promoting Agriculture for 8 years, which was a longer time than I served as President of the United States.
Number 2.
Here we are. John Adams lost his first case as a lawyer. Yes, I did. Thank you for bringing that up. In truth, I studied law for 2 years with James Putnam, while I served as a school teacher in Worcester. Less than 2 months after I was admitted to the bar, I drew my first writ, my first case, to settle a dispute, if you will, between two neighbours, because one neighbour's cows were grazing on the other's field. Unfortunately, I filled out the paper improperly, and the writ was thrown out. I feared that I might be seen as a laughingstock in the community. But I did improve over time. My reputation improved, I took more cases, and my work was not limited to dealing with cows.
Number 3.
Adams defended independence and British soldiers. I recognize what you endeavoured here. Yes, I was indeed an advocate for independence from England, and I also defended British soldiers and their captain, which might seem to appear a contradiction. However, the soldiers that I defended, as a result of what some call the Boston Massacre, they were accused of shooting into a crowd with murderous intent, and no one would defend them. And as much as I wanted the British out of Boston, I did not think that these men should be denied justice, and possibly be hanged by an angry mob. No, every person deserves a fair trial, even the people with whom we disagree.
Number 4.
George Washington was nominated to command the Continental Army by John Adams. Yes, that is also correct. Each colony had its own militia, which was essentially a group of volunteer defenders of the colony, but each militia was far from coordinated with the others. And after the British Army attacked Massachusetts militia at Lexington and then at Concord, it became evident that we needed a central, more unified army under the command of a singular, strong leader. And since at the time a number of Southern members of the Continental Congress thought that the difficulty with the British was Massachusetts' difficulty alone, I believed that a commander-in-chief from the Southern colonies would help unite them in the cause. And young Colonel George Washington was a respected leader, and he could unite the full exertion of the colonies. It was my privilege to nominate him.
Number 5.
John Adams signed the 2 documents that began and ended the American Revolution. That is an interesting perspective on the Revolution, and one that I do not necessarily agree with. You see, in my mind, the American Revolution began in the hearts and minds of the American people well before the first shot was fired. And the fighting with England began over a year before Congress voted for independence. But I did sign the Declaration itself, which explained to the world our reasons for the separation from England. And then, years later, I served on the United States delegation to negotiate peace with England and signed the peace treaty in Paris, which essentially ended the revolution, I suppose. But I did also negotiate for New Englanders something nearly as dear as independence itself. Fishing rights.
Number 6.
During the Revolution, Adams was on a list to be hanged. Yes, that unfortunately is a truth. It is. In the early days of the Revolution, Edward Rutledge, Benjamin Franklin, and myself travelled to New York so that we might discuss the possibilities of peace. We met with Lord Howe, who was the commander of the British Army, and our meeting did not go well. Lord Howe was utterly polite, but his instructed offer of peace was a complete surrender by America to Great Britain, with the possibility of pardons to certain offending participants of the rebellion. Years later, when I served as America's first ambassador to England, I discovered there was a list of people given to Lord Howe at the time by Privy Council of people not to be pardoned, and I was on that list. Certain British newspapers actually chided the king and ministry for having to accept a traitor into their court. And I was worried that people would not remember me.
Number 7.
John Adams inspired an academy. Thank you for recognizing that. Actually, I have long believed in the importance of education and learning in general. And after seeing the success of the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, the collections of kings and others in Europe, I gave a rather lengthy proposal to a colleague of mine, Reverend Samuel Cooper, and it was for the creation of an Academy of Arts and Sciences in Boston. I eventually had to return to Europe before anything could be done, but within a year of my departure, Reverend Cooper had judiciously and effectively acted upon my suggestion, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences was established. I would later serve as its president for 24 years. Again, much longer than my term as the United States president. But I am pleased that the Academy continues to encourage knowledge and the use of that knowledge to improve society.
Number 8.
Adams wrote America's oldest constitution. Yes, I did actually. I wrote a constitution primarily on my own, and it was not the United States Constitution. No, Massachusetts representatives had convened earlier and written an earlier constitution for the Commonwealth. The people of Massachusetts hated it, and so it was reconvened by new representatives to create another, and I was asked to serve upon that convention. And through committees and subcommittees, it came down to me to write the entire document. And the entire document was approved with actually very little change. Other states wrote their constitutions earlier, but they did have to be changed or entirely rewritten. But the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 is the oldest functioning constitution in America.
Number 9.
John Adams showed us the money. I'm not entirely certain what that means. I did negotiate loans with the Dutch for money so that the United States could afford to continue our revolution and stand as a country. I even decided to travel to Holland and ask for the loans before Congress had even written to me suggesting that I ask for them. So indeed, I did show America money, nearly $5 million, which may not sound to many of you listening in. However, it was a great benefit to those of us in the 18th century, and it afforded us the means to become the country we desired to become.
Number 10.
Adams kept the United States out of war. Well, very much so, although not during the Revolution, of course. It was during my presidency, presidency of the United States, that is. France was warring with England, and they wanted America to fight England with them. But we had signed treaties that kept America neutral, and France became angry. They started attacking American ships at sea. And Americans were angry with that, and they wanted to retaliate. But I realized that America did not have the capacity to fight another war so soon after our revolution. And France could not fight two wars at once. So I prepared our navy for the possibility of war, but I sent ambassadors to France to negotiate a peace, and peace prevailed. I was so pleased with this that I said to a friend that I wanted that accomplishment on my gravestone. But I was not in earnest. Well, this has been quite the remembrance. I thank you for sharing these fascinating facts with me, and I trust that they will serve you well. Perhaps they may encourage you to do some fascinating things of your own. May you do things which will make you well remembered.